information, knowledge, and your secrets. So if you and a man was in a corner doing something you wasn't supposed to be doing...
You will tell it?
No, somebody come to tell me.
Okay.
The whole conversation around Katt Williams, Will Smith, and Keanu Reeves didn't just come out of nowhere. It actually started feeling weird when Katt began casually dropping names in interviews. Like, he knew way more than he was supposed to say. And you know how Katt talks, right? He doesn't just say things, he implies things, and then lets your mind connect the dots.
You can fool yourself into thinking there isn't one, but the evidence will be clear. So like when I be like, oh, these guys are wearing dresses. Everybody's like, oh, he keeps talking about people wearing dresses. No, it's not.
That is a weird thing.
It's not like that.
He says things in a way that feels like he's exposing something, even if he never fully spells it out. And this time, the moment he started hinting at certain actors not liking each other, people leaned in. Because it didn't sound like normal celebrity gossip. It sounded like there was a deeper story hiding underneath.
Being called crazy, and how there's a fine line between being crazy or being a genius, you know? And he said in particular that stuck out to me was that it takes a strong person to sit in the seat that you're sitting in.
At first, it didn't even feel connected. He was talking about power, about image, about how certain celebrities are protected while others aren't. And then slowly, almost casually, the conversation started circling around Will Smith. Not directly calling him out, but more like describing a situation that felt way too familiar. And that's when things started getting uncomfortable, because you could feel where it was going before he even said anything clearly.
It's two answers. First of all, let's be very, very clear. It is possible that there isn't anything funnier than a guy in a dress. And if that's the case, then it might also be said that there's nothing funnier than a black guy in a dress.
And then this happened. Katt brings up the idea that in Hollywood, there are chosen people, and then there are people who just naturally win the audience without trying. And right there, without saying names, it already starts pointing somewhere. Because if you think about it, Will Smith spent years building one of the most controlled and perfect images in Hollywood. Everything about him was polished. The interviews, the movies, the public appearances. It all felt very intentional. But then Katt drops another layer, and this is where it gets interesting. He starts talking about someone who didn't need all that. Someone who didn't chase the spotlight, but still ended up being loved by everyone. And obviously that's where Keanu Reeves enters the conversation, even if his name isn't immediately said. Because when you think about Keanu, it's the complete opposite energy. He doesn't oversell himself. He doesn't try to control how people see him. And yet somehow people respect him even more.
What do you think happens when we die, Keanu Reeves?
I know that the ones who love us will miss us.
Now, think about that for a second. You've got one actor who spent decades carefully building an image, and another who just exists and gets the same, if not more, admiration. That alone creates a weird tension. Not loud, not public, but that's definitely there. And Katt starts hinting that this kind of imbalance doesn't sit well with everyone behind the scenes. Because here's the part nobody is talking about. In Hollywood, image isn't just about fame, it's about control. If you can control how people see you, you can control your career, your opportunities, your influence. And Will Smith mastered that for years. He was the safe choice, the likable star, the one studios could trust. But when that image cracks, even a little, everything changes.
Of dress-wearing people before him. So now we had Big Mama's house 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
I've never seen Medea in a pantsuit. I think she wears dresses. So now I'm saying, why are we picking on poor little Kevin Hart?
And we all saw that shift happen. The moment when people stopped seeing Will the same way. Suddenly, the internet wasn't praising him the way it used to. People started questioning things, looking back at old moments differently. And once that happens, it's really hard to go back to how things were. Meanwhile, Keanu Reeves is still out here, doing the same thing he's always done. Staying quiet, being kind, showing up in roles people actually enjoy. And the craziest part is, His image didn't need fixing because it never really broke. That consistency is powerful in a way that's hard to compete with. And then Katt takes it even further. He starts hinting that sometimes it's not about personal dislike, it's about what someone represents. And that changes everything, because if Keanu represents authenticity and effortlessness, then anyone who had to work to build that same image might feel a certain way about it, even if they never say it out loud. In a 2014 interview, Katt Williams shocked everyone when he claimed to know the dark secrets of Hollywood.
We're positioned as a person in Hollywood, I'm saying, anyway, just because of the amount of truth that I will tell and the fact that I take joy in it. And there's no way that you can tell that much truth without offending certain portions of the population.
Katt mentions how certain actors quietly lose opportunities when the audience starts shifting its attention. Not because they suddenly became untalented, but because someone else fits the moment better. And when you think about Keanu's comeback with John Wick, it starts to make a lot more sense. That comeback wasn't normal. It wasn't just another movie success. It changed how people saw Keanu completely. He went from being respected to being almost untouchable in terms of public love. And when that happens, studios notice. Opportunities shift. Roles get written differently. And suddenly, the landscape changes. Shannon Sharpe also said this on these views.
I remember when I did Cam. I remember getting up and I turned back and I look at my Katt, and I look at my producer and he's shaking his head. I'm like, oh man, we done messed up. So I'm like, what did I say?
Yeah.
Did I say something? Did he like?
Now imagine being someone who has been at the top for so long, watching that shift happen in real time. Even if you don't say anything, even if you stay professional, there's going to be some kind of reaction internally. Because Hollywood isn't just about talent, it's about timing and perception. And this is where Katt's words start hitting harder. He suggests that some celebrities feel threatened not by actions, but by presence. Just someone existing in a certain way can disrupt everything. And when he says that, it's hard not to connect the dots again, because Keanu's presence is calm, steady, and consistent. While Will's situation has been anything but that in recent years, and that contrast becomes more obvious the more you look at it. And Joe Rogan shared his thoughts on Keanu.
One of the nicest, coolest people on the planet, because no one has a bad word to say about that guy, ever. He might be what we should all aspire to be. We should all aspire to be Keanu Reeves.
Or he might have some really crazy secrets.
No.
I don't know.
I bet he's the nicest. It seems like everybody who runs into him. You know, like I'm sure there's some people that ran into you where they caught you the wrong way and it all went sideways.
But it gets worse. Katt starts hinting that once the audience picks a side, even unconsciously, it changes how everything plays out. The same action can be judged differently depending on who does it. The same movie can be received differently depending on the actor's image. And once that bias sets in, it's almost impossible to control. So now you've got this situation where one actor is constantly being reevaluated while the other is being consistently praised. And over time, that gap starts to feel bigger than it actually is. Katt talks about how Hollywood quietly compares its stars all the time, even when there's no official rivalry. It's not always about direct competition. Sometimes it's about who represents what the audience currently wants. And right now, the audience seems to be leaning more toward authenticity over perfection.
Move me in the direction. I'm glad it did. I understand what comes along with that. But if you remember, he said it. He said, this is going to put you in another dimension.
He definitely did.
He said,
but my mama said, boy, there's power in the tongue.
Yes.
And that's where things get uncomfortable for someone like Will Smith, because his entire career was built on being the perfect version of himself, the version everyone could agree on. But now, people are more drawn to someone who feels real, even if that person isn't trying to impress anyone. And that shift, it's subtle, but it's powerful, because now every move gets looked at differently. Every project gets compared. Every public moment gets analyzed. And whether it's fair or not, that comparison keeps happening in the background. And this is where Katt's main point starts becoming clear. He's not saying there's some loud feud or direct hatred. He's saying there's a deeper tension created by how these two actors exist in the same space but are perceived completely differently.
Can we talk about how Katt Williams
the greatest.
is not only one of the greatest comedians of all time, incredibly hilarious, but he is, without a doubt, the greatest marketer in the history of comedy.
Whoa.
Katt Williams went on one podcast. Went on one podcast, did one interview, and sold out his next tour 2 or 3 times over, I bet.
And honestly, once you start looking at it that way, it changes everything. Because now it's not about one moment or one incident. It's about years of buildup. Years of image, perception, and public opinion have been slowly shifting in opposite directions. And then you realize something. Sometimes, the biggest conflicts in Hollywood are the ones that are never spoken about publicly. The ones that don't make headlines. The ones that exist quietly behind the scenes. And that's exactly what this feels like. Because on the surface, there's nothing. No interviews calling each other out, no drama, no obvious signs, but underneath there's a story forming. A story about image, perception, and how quickly things can change in an industry that never stays still. And the craziest part is, Katt didn't even need to say everything directly. He just gave enough hints for people to start connecting the dots themselves. And once you start connecting those dots, it gets harder to ignore what he might actually be pointing at.
And there are going to be some people that you thought you might be able to get that they're not going to come now.
Right.
And that's absolutely has happened. That's absolutely has happened. They were so excited. Thanks for reaching out. We can't wait to sit down.
Because this isn't just about Will Smith and Keanu Reeves anymore. It's about what they represent. 2 completely different paths in the same industry. One built on control and perfection, the other on simplicity and consistency. And when those 2 paths cross, even quietly, there's always going to be some kind of tension. And trust me, this is only half of the story. So now that you've seen how this quiet tension could even exist between Will Smith and Keanu Reeves, this is where things start getting even more uncomfortable. Because Katt Williams doesn't just leave it at image and perception. He starts hinting at something that feels way bigger than just careers. He starts talking about how Hollywood reacts when someone refuses to play the game. And you already know what that means. Because in almost every Katt Williams interview, there's always that underlying idea that some celebrities follow a system, while others don't. And when someone doesn't follow it, they either get pushed out or they get treated differently behind the scenes. Not always publicly, but in ways that slowly affect their opportunities. So when people started connecting that idea to Keanu Reeves, it made everything feel even more interesting. Because Keanu has always been that one actor who feels like he's outside of the usual Hollywood machine. He doesn't overshare. He doesn't chase headlines. He doesn't seem interested in controlling narratives. And somehow, he still wins. Rogan has also talked about this point in his podcast.
Yeah. That's some over-the-top fame. He hit that Johnny Depp, Tom Cruise level of fame and then just became this super chill, mellow guy that can just like go through crowds. That guy sits on the subway by himself. No, like...
That's freaking awesome.
Yeah, but there's no obvious outward displays of wealth from him.
Now compare that to Will Smith's journey, especially in recent years. His career has felt a lot more structured, a lot more managed. Every move feels calculated. Every appearance feels intentional. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when you place that next to someone like Keanu, it creates a contrast that people can't ignore. And this is where it gets dangerous. Katt starts hinting that sometimes the people who follow the system expect a certain level of respect or protection from it. And when they don't get that anymore, it can feel like something has shifted against them. Not necessarily because someone replaced them directly, but because the audience itself has changed what it values. Charleston White talked about Katt Williams and praised his fearless approach to exposing Hollywood's secrets.
What is your take when you see Katt Williams' Club Shay Shay interview do what it did for what you consider yourself? You're Rat Williams. We've talked to you multiple times. You spoke on Katt Williams, like what kind of comedian he is and your admiration for him. For what that was, do you feel you had any part to play?
Because he gave you stories that didn't have nothing to do with me.
That's true.
And if you really think about it, that's exactly what we've been seeing. The audience today doesn't just care about talent. They care about authenticity. They care about how real someone feels. And Keanu fits that perfectly without even trying. Meanwhile, Will Smith is in a position where everything he does gets analyzed. Not just his acting, but his personality, his decisions, his past. And once that level of scrutiny starts, it doesn't really go away. At the same time, Keanu's energy stayed consistent. No major controversies, no dramatic shifts, just the same calm presence he's always had. And over time, that consistency starts to look even stronger when everything else around it feels unstable. And here's the part that really makes you think. Katt suggests that sometimes the hate people talk about isn't even direct hate, it's frustration. It's the feeling of watching someone else succeed in a way that you can't replicate, no matter how hard you try. And that kind of frustration doesn't need words, it just sits there quietly.
Now where I stand, I can no longer do that. Those are just the breaks. And so I wish that what I learned in 6 days, I could have learned in 6 minutes. It didn't happen that way. I'm just thankful that it didn't take 6 years instead of those 6 days.
Yes. Because how do you compete with someone who isn't even trying to compete? How do you match someone whose entire appeal comes from being effortless? That's not something you can rehearse or plan. That's something you either have or you don't. And this is where things start feeling a little deeper than just Hollywood drama, because now it's not about movies or roles anymore. It's about identity, about how these actors are seen by the world. Will Smith used to represent perfection, success, control, the idea that you can shape your image into something flawless. Keanu Reeves represents something completely different: imperfection, simplicity, the idea that you don't need to control everything to be respected.
I don't think Will was pretending in that moment. Either. I thought he was having a nervous breakdown in front of us.
Well, here's the thing. For Will to be having a nervous breakdown, for it to affect him like that, this is collaborative. When Will Smith speaks, Will Smith is not the giant that he is.
And right now, the audience seems to be leaning toward that second version. And then this happened. Katt talks about how once the audience emotionally connects with someone, it becomes almost impossible to turn against them. And that's exactly what Keanu has built over the years. Not just fans, but genuine goodwill. The kind that protects you even when you're not actively in the spotlight. But for someone like Will, that connection feels more fragile now. Because once people start questioning you, even small things get magnified. And that creates pressure. A lot of pressure. And pressure changes how people move. It changes decisions. It changes energy. It changes how you show up in public. And when you're constantly under that pressure, seeing someone else move freely without it can feel frustrating, even if you don't admit it. And this is where Katt's message really hits. He's basically saying that Hollywood isn't just about talent or success. It's about alignment, about being in sync with what the audience wants at a certain time. And right now, the audience seems to value authenticity over perfection.
For ratings, I understand what it's worth doing when the industry is canceling one black guy. I know what happens when they are going to elevate another.
Which puts someone like Keanu in the perfect position without him even trying. And puts someone like Will in a position where he has to rebuild something that used to feel automatic. And rebuilding an image is way harder than building one from scratch. Because now you're not just creating something new, you're trying to fix something people already have opinions about. And that's a completely different challenge. And then you start noticing something else. Other celebrities don't really speak on this directly, but their reactions say a lot. The way people casually praise Keanu, the way his name comes up in conversations about good people in Hollywood. It feels natural. But when Will's name comes up, it's more complicated. There's respect, but there's also hesitation. There's support, but also distance. Meanwhile, Dr. Umar Johnson weighed in on the situation as he suggested that Sharp might have disregarded an unwritten Hollywood rule as he let Katt Williams discuss such major topics on his podcast.
The Hollywood rule. And what is the Hollywood rule, Art? When you discuss black celebrities as a celebrity, you never let nobody.
And that difference might seem small, but in Hollywood, it's everything. Because perception shapes reality in that industry. and Katt understands that better than most. So when he hints at this kind of tension, he's not talking about a headline. He's talking about something deeper, something that builds over time without anyone openly addressing it. And honestly, that's what makes this whole situation feel so real, because not every rivalry needs a public fight. Not every dislike needs to be spoken. Sometimes it's just about how two people exist in the same space and how the world reacts to them differently. And once that difference becomes obvious, it creates a silent divide. And that's what this feels like. Not a loud feud, not a dramatic conflict, but a quiet tension built on image, perception, and timing. And the craziest part is, most people wouldn't even notice it if Katt didn't start pointing in that direction. But now that he did, it's hard to look at things the same way, because now every comparison feels more meaningful. Every public moment feels more loaded. Every career move feels like part of a bigger story. And whether you believe Katt completely or not, one thing is clear.
You can't let Katt Williams go in on Oprah. Oprah is an A-list celebrity. You can't let Monique go in on Oprah and Steve. They're A-list celebrities. Shannon Sharpe broke the one rule.
Once these kinds of ideas get into people's minds, they don't just disappear. They grow, they spread, and they make you question everything you thought you understood about how Hollywood really works. And here's where things start getting even more layered, because once you really sit with what Katt Williams was hinting at, you realize this isn't just about two actors existing differently. It's about how the industry reacts when someone stops fitting the role they were once perfect for. And when you look at Will Smith, that idea hits harder than people want to admit. Because for years, Will wasn't just an actor. He was a symbol. He represented success in a very controlled, almost scripted way. Every interview felt polished. Every story about him felt intentional. Even his personal life, the way it was presented, felt like part of a larger narrative. And for a long time, that worked perfectly.
With Shannon Sharpe, not even Shannon Sharpe violated the rule. A lot of celebrities are being told not to interview with Shannon Sharpe. A lot of his guests are canceling their interviews because they don't want to get blacklisted by Oprah.
But then something changed. And once that shift happened, it's like the audience started seeing everything through a different lens. And this is where Katt's words start to feel less like random commentary and more like a warning. Because he keeps hinting that once the audience stops believing in the image, the system around that image starts to weaken too. Now compare that to Keanu Reeves again, and it almost feels unfair, because Keanu never built himself as a symbol in that same way. He didn't present a perfect life. He didn't try to sell a flawless version of himself. So when people look at him, they're not expecting perfection. They're just appreciating consistency. And that gives him a kind of freedom that someone like Will doesn't have anymore. Katt starts talking about how some celebrities become trapped in their own image. Like they built something so strong that they can't step outside of it without everything falling apart.
Are you saying it was?
I'm saying that everything that happens in a business that's based off of pretend, that seems like a setup, is.
And when he says that, it feels like he's describing Will's situation without even saying his name directly. Because think about it. Every time Will tries to move forward now, it feels like he has to rebuild trust with the audience. Not just entertain them, but convince them again to sit down. And that's a completely different kind of pressure. Meanwhile, Keanu just shows up. No need to explain himself. No need to prove anything. Just shows up, and people are already on his side. And this is where it gets even more uncomfortable. Because Katt hints that sometimes the industry itself starts favoring the person who doesn't create problems. Not in a negative way, but in a practical way.
The fact of the matter is that in order to technically be sane, it requires that your belief system go along with everybody else's. And so
it comes from watching someone else gain something you used to have. And when he says that, it hits differently. Because Keanu didn't take anything from Will directly, but the way people talk about him now, the respect, the admiration, the trust, it feels similar to what Will used to have at his peak. And that kind of comparison can be uncomfortable, even if it's never spoken out loud, because now it's not just about your own career. It's about how you're being measured against someone else. And right now, the natural approach seems to be winning. And that's not something you can fix overnight. And then you start noticing something else. The stories about Keanu keep building. Not because he's promoting them, but because people keep sharing them. Little moments, acts of kindness, things that feel genuine. And every time one of those stories comes out, it reinforces his image even more.
Is he making shit up left and right? Is he saying some shit that's true left and right? Sure. But when you mix truth and made up...
Because it's probably not hate in the way people think. It's not personal. It's not direct. It's more like a reaction to a situation that feels out of your control. It's the feeling of watching someone succeed in a way that challenges your own position. It's the realization that the audience's expectations have changed. So the real question is, are we actually watching talent and hard work play out, or are we just watching a system decide who gets to be loved and who doesn't? And if that's true, then it gets uncomfortable because it means any image, no matter how perfect it looks, can flip overnight. And if it can happen to someone like Will, then honestly, who's next? And that's it for today's video. Subscribe for more and stay tuned until next time.